path that led you to mustard?
Yeah, so I started off in performance marketing, and so my background has always been in very analytical, looking at numbers and making decisions based on those numbers. What I saw in the marketplace was that influencer marketing was a hyper growing field, and the restaurant industry was highly segmented. We're talking about $1 trillion industry with over 1 million restaurants nationally across the US. And by using by building that technology, we can aggregate the two highly segmented market together. And sorry, let's start over.
No, go ahead.
Yeah,
This is why it's not live to tape. You are good to go. So I'm just going to ask the question again, and we're just going to go again from the top.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I'm a little bit nervous too.
No, oh my God. No, dude, like we're cool. Like, you know me. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Like what I want to know, like when I say like share the path that led you to mustard, like what I'm looking for is like what makes you an expert, right? So like what I want to know is I've always had an interest in marketing. This has been my perspective on marketing, right? Like you're not like, it's not a podcast. Like you're just talking to me. And so like, let's just chat. And so like what I want to know, because like, I'll give you an example. Like I graduated in the middle of my class in marketing before the fucking internet. Like what a waste of an education, Vince.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. My senior paper was on billboards. And so like, it's interesting because I mean, I know that I am older than you. But like marketing has just evolved a lot. And so what I want to know is like, what gravitated you to marketing and like, how have you come up through it? And then ultimately how that led to mustard, you know?
Okay. Got it. Cool. Got it.
So like, just share that path. Talk to me about like what drew you to marketing to begin with.
Okay, yeah. So I started in marketing when I was actually my first job while I was still in college doing customer service. So I hear a lot of complaints about so and so is not working or the product's not working. And when I was doing my college course, when my professor said the first thing you should do in marketing is marketing research, and that resonated with me because these customer complaints and product feedback is kind of what market research is telling you about the type of products that you're building. And when I was doing that course, I naturally transitioned to a marketing role because I was hearing all the feedback. I worked with the product team internally with the company and kind of revised a lot of their products. On top of that, during that time, there was a show called Mad Men that I was really deeply in love with. I saw the show and I was like, oh, this is amazing. Being Don Draper, having whiskey in the office.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coming up with creative ideas on how to market certain strategies for different companies. I thought this was the dream job for me. And I decided to pursue marketing at that point, right after college.
And so I know that your specialization became performance marketing, but for those that don't know what performance marketing is, how would you explain it to somebody?
Yeah, it was actually during the recession. So a lot of the times creative agencies were being cut back because of budget cuts, and performance marketing was still growing due to, you can measure the ROI and revenue. And so a lot of the budget in 2008 was being shifted from more the creative side into the measurable side. What it means by performance marketing is really you're able to measure every dollar you spent into an actionable revenue generated metric. They're direct or indirectly. There's a lot of different levers you can pull. For me, I was part of the SEM team, which is search engine marketing. So it is very actionable. We can see exactly how much revenue was generated per dollar.
It's really interesting you bring that up because as a restaurateur myself, I was obsessed with marketing. And I was obsessed with performance marketing. And the reason that I was like, I never had enough time or enough money to like do this thing that everyone else does where, they just send out a social media post or like they'll send out an email, right? And it's like checking off a box. But like what I advocate for with my clients is like, you should have a profit and loss statement attached to every email you send out. Because like, I'll say like you sent out an email, how much money did you make off of it? How much money did you think you would make off of it? And like they're like, well, I mean, dude, I just sent out that email. And it's like, why? What's the point? Like, we're not here to check boxes. We're here to make more money. And so when you look at like how overworked the industry is, like performance marketing in my mind is the answer to making sure that you're maximizing the return on investment of every minute that you spend marketing your brand to make sure that you're not wasting your time. Is that the lens you look through as well?
100%. I remember I got really good at Excel spreadsheets as a result of tracking these performance marketing that we're talking about. Um, I mean, think of as my first role out of marketing was very unlike the madman Don Draper lifestyle.
Amen. And still to this day, am I
To this
right?
day, yeah, I'm staring at a spreadsheet. I'm more like a financial analyst staring at stocks,
Sure.
looking at where I should spend, how much is this channel generating. And back to your example about the email campaign one, what are the KPIs, the key metrics, performance metrics, how many were sent out, how many were opened, what is the read rate, and then based on that, how many of them went to our website, and then at the end, how many of them converted into an actionable like dollar amount.
And again, you can do a lot more of that. And what ends up happening is, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but what I found was I was doing a lot less quote unquote marketing, right? I was doing less but better. Because like when you track the data, then it really becomes about, is it effective? And so ultimately, I think what that led you to was looking at all of the different ways that you could impact marketing, right? That you could create that level of awareness that ultimately results in conversion. How does that parlay into the founding of Mustard?
Yeah, so Mustard is an online platform, and because we're online, a lot of the metrics are quite trackable. When you look at social engagement, social aspects, for example, views, engagement rates, how many shares, how many comments, these are all signals that tell us how effective your marketing dollar goes when you go in and spend them. What's a little bit harder to do is at the end of the day, restaurant operators care about revenue, right? So with a little bit more integration, we can tie it into say OpenTable or some of our the booking platforms, where if we tell our influencers to mention a certain code, we can tie it directly attributable to that influencer itself. And so that's a little bit more clear in terms of direct revenue versus indirect revenue with the social signals that I mentioned, the views and the engagement metrics.
So, when I have founders on, especially for founders that create solutions for the restaurant industry, what I like to highlight, I guess, is that you're human, right? So I think with any business, the way that it works is it's very similar to having children, which you will experience one day as well. And it's the same experience, Vince, where what happens is like you give birth to this thing, right? And you tell it exactly what it's going to be. And then it spends the rest of its life telling you exactly what it's going to be, right? When you release a restaurant into the wild, like it grows, it changes, it evolves over time. And if I remember correctly, in one of the first conversations we had, you said like Mustard today isn't the original vision. It wasn't, it is an iteration of that. So tell me what you learned through like the launching and iteration process of Mustard.
Yeah, 100%. When the first iteration was more about focusing on creating viral food content through the influencers, they would come in, promote the food, and then do it through the delivery apps where we pay a referral fee through Uber Eats or DoorDash. That didn't exactly work simply because our business model didn't work. That iteration required the influencers to join our community, pay a fee, and potentially make money of the content they produce. We pivoted since then about 2 years ago. That's actually when I first joined Mustard. Um, I During the pivot, we started to work with restaurant operators. We're saying, hey, you are more of the hirer of influencers. So you would pay us, we would find the influencer for you, and then we would do everything for you, fully integrated. Get the influencers to come in, track it for you and tell you exactly what is the ROI per influencers. So that really changed the dynamics of the business model simply because influencers themselves, in my opinion, are job seekers. So if you are asking a job seeker to pay for something when they're trying to make money themselves, it didn't work. That was iteration two. Iteration two is we now have job employers, in this case, the restaurants are the employers, and they're finding the job seekers who are the influencers that are coming in, do the reviews, and get paid for the work that they do for the employer.
And so to oversimplify, Mustard is a marketplace.
Yes,
It is a marketplace that pairs influencers with restaurants looking for exposure.
exactly. To get the food discovered.
In understanding that, and here's the thing. So I think I'm best in the world at what I do because I have a really big sample size, right? And so as it relates to influencer marketing, I think you're best in the world. And the reason I do is you have a really big sample size. So I want to talk about how effective influencer marketing is generally, how people are underutilizing it. But before I do, I think the scale is valuable. So how many influencers do you have on platform today?
We have over 175,000 creators. Not all of them are influencers. We try to define the two terms differently. So when we first started Mustard, it was, 10,000. We hit about 25,000 food related influencers, and then now we're at 175,000 creators. The reason I don't want to use influencers versus creators is influencers is how we define as someone with a lot of followers and reach, versus a creator could be someone that's around 2,000 followers, a little bit not as big. But what we really focus on and what we do well is when you have a lot of different creators come into our platform and consistently drive these videos for the restaurants, they're referring their social networks. 2,000 potential customers do a referral is better than low engagement from 100,000 or $1 million follower influencer.
I was just watching this social media video from Gary Vaynerchuk, and he was talking about like the age of branding is dead. And here's what I think. I think that branding has a tendency to be performative, right? In the way that like it's this thing that it's really hard to calculate whether it makes you money or not. And I think by and large, most people view influencer marketing as a branding play. But I think your perspective is really interesting. I've heard you describe it as an underpriced performance channel. What do you mean
Yes.
by that?
Yeah, I believe the way, maybe because now that I'm heading Mustard, I'm changing it more into a performance platform rather than a branding platform. That's just been my background. What I mean is we're trying to be very visible about the CPM metrics. How we're now introduced it into our platform where anyone can see what is the CPM per influencer slash creator.
Can you define that for me, Vince? What is
Yes.
the CPM?
Yeah, it's the cost per 1,000 impressions, views. It's how most, I would say, marketers buy ads, and we're transforming our influencer platform into more of an ad platform. So rather than a brand platform. So, for example, you could get a really big influencers, but their CPM or cost per 1,000 views would be really high, simply because there's a mismatch between what they charge versus what they're able to deliver. We're trying to structure it where now the metrics are balanced across all influencers, and restaurants in the future, or will be able to buy based on the CPM. Say like, oh, I have a budget of say $2,000 and I want to reach 1 million people in the Los Angeles area. We would create a campaign and go and find the influencers per that budget that you specified and get you exactly 1 million views, rather than you deciding, hey, which influencers should I work with, who should I recruit. All of that has become automated, where we now take the reign on that.
So here's what I like about it is I like the idea of this. It's a B2B strategy in a B2C market. right? So like what I love about B2B is the predictability, like the flywheel, right? That if I spend X amount of dollars and I know what my cost of conversion is, that I'm going to get Y on the back end. And that's just, there's just not a lot of that in restaurant marketing, right? Or even in restaurant advertising. Um, but what you're talking about is getting visibility locally, right? With a target market that's interested potentially in what you do for a living. And I just think it's really interesting. And what I want to unpack here is kind of all of the hurdles around, I think, social media marketing in general and how this potentially solves for them. It's one of the biggest issues I think with social media is it is of inherently low intent, right? Is that the people that are on there aren't necessarily looking to figure out the next thing they're going to eat. But when they're working with or when they're viewing an influencer, right, that they follow because they're interested in that kind of information, I feel like it overcomes that, does it not?
It does, yeah. There's a sort of inherent social contract between who you follow and who you perceive as trustworthy. And when you are working with people that you follow and the audience, respectively, they already have you kind of tap into that intent.
And then let's talk about the cost of that attention. One of the things that you argue is that as it relates to influencer marketing today, uh, through the channels that you use, it's actually an underpriced performance channel.
It
Um,
is. It is
Talk to me about that.
relatively comparing. We did an exercise where we're comparing influencer marketing versus radio ads, TV ads, or even local flyer ads. And we were, on average, our cost was around 3.5 or about $3 CPM. So back to the original metrics that I was talking about, that's $3 for per thousand views versus all these other channels where they can range anywhere from 15 to 20 to 30 dollars. I believe TV at the one point was about $40 CPM. And then if you look at streaming ads, Hulu, last I checked, was around $30 CPM. So it's 10 times lower.
And then, we talk about influencers and we're lumping everybody into the same bucket. But they're different, right? They're creators, they're influencers, they're large macro influencers and micro influencers. For restaurants, what do you find to be the most effective type of influencer?
The most effective are the ones where you don't necessarily have to work with the mega influencers simply because their CPM is relatively high, and the engagement rate is not as high as the macro and nano influencers. And so the effective CPM, for when we look at the metrics, um, it's better to create 10 pieces of content versus one piece of content with the big influencers. I believe that's the conclusion I'm getting at. And we've seen that when we tested it with versus the two, the overall revenue, if we're able to tie it with the bookings, is that the macro influencers outperform the the mega celebrity influencers. We also have a case study on our website that highlights this.
I want to talk about I guess the best strategies around influencer marketing. So like there are going to be a bunch of people listening that say, well, I've had a few influencers in. It didn't do anything for my business. And then through your platform, the thing that you've done is you nurture the relationship between the restaurant and the influencer. I would argue that like, if we pretend it's a courtship, right?
It is.
That,
Yeah.
that you have a very specific requirements around like the way that the influencer and the restaurant work together to maximize the ROI for the restaurant. Talk to me about why you think some influencer relationships don't work and like how you guys curate to make sure that they do.
Yeah, that's the magic of a marketplace. It's if certain influencers misbehave or don't do well, we have rating systems based on historically how well they performed with other restaurants. And so new restaurants that are coming into our platform, they can see exactly how well this influencers have engaged performance history. If they didn't do well, we generally tend to penalize them or decrease the number of engagement with future prospects. And so that's a reassurance on the restaurant side, and it's vice versa on on the other end as well as for creators. Is if they do really well, we reward them. That's the benefit of that. This goes back to kind of like the data driven marketplace that we're in, is that you see a lot of data between, well, at least we see a lot of data. And what you alluded to about having a big sample size, we know exactly how the creator is going to perform based on historical performance.
What are you looking for? Like, what does a perfect influencer do? Like, how are they engaging with the restaurant? Is it specific calls to action? Is it, is it a specific type of video? I know I sound like a nerd, but I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. So think of like an Uber driver. What do you care about when when you call an Uber? They got to show up. Number one.
Right.
So I believe that's the most important metric, is they have to show up. Number two, once they've shown up, did they take you to your destination? In this case, did the influencer post the content, or did they just come for a free meal and ate and didn't do anything? So these two, in my opinion, are the most important things. They must show up and they must post the content.
And then as it goes, if you were to push past that, how are you tracking ROI? Is it just through number of impressions? Are you working like to say, oh, if you say this, or you type in this code, or you get this thing?
Yeah, both.
Talk to me about that.
Right. So it depends on how sophisticated the restaurant is, and most restaurants are not sophisticated marketers or technically savvy, and they would just have to rely on the impression or views, whatever is available online engagement. But some of the more sophisticated ones that are really dedicated in influencer marketing, they will do an integration with delivery platforms. For example, we could have influencers measure a certain code and have Uber Eats or DoorDash deliver, and that's a justifiable ROI. But also the issue with that is there's a lot of foot traffic loss that we aren't able to measure. So if they are able to we're able to tap into their POS system and tie the coupon code to their POS systems, they can say like, okay, this particular code is only available through this influencer. We knew it came through there. Or there's another way where we can have a special menu item, say like it's the that only available through the mention through the influencers. Then the restaurants themselves say, oh, you mentioned this item, I work with this influencer, it must come from that particular person.
So we were introduced through a friend of a friend. And then I actually engaged you to work with one of my clients in Las Vegas. And here's what I found useful and impressive about the platform, and something that I think is worth discussing, which is volume. So it's a very Alex Hormozian type idea, right? That so much of successful marketing comes down to the volume with which you're able to market, especially online, because people are distracted, because there's always a lot going on. In engaging you for this client that I had, who was desperate for attention. And I don't mean that in like a pathetic way. I mean that as in like they had been in the market. They were leaders in the market in kind of that health food space. And then because they were like a category of one, had just enjoyed that benefit. And then as health food became this more relevant thing, influencers and social media and all of this came out, and they just weren't interested in it because they were a category of one. They had never had to compete in this vertical that candidly they brought to Las Vegas like 10, 15 years ago. And so it wasn't really about rebranding. It was really about awareness. And I thought, like, how do you get this out in a localized market, so that it will resonate with people in a place that people are doing it? And so we worked with you guys, and it's not like you brought in 6 influencers and that was it. I mean, I would argue at this point, Vince, and it's probably been close to a year, I'd have to do the math on it, but you probably brought in, I don't know, 40, 50, 60 influencers at this point over the past, 10, 11 months that you've been working with them. I mean, the sheer volume on that is insane, right? Like 60 influencers, even micro influencers, would still represent, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of impressions in a localized market. Talk to me about your approach to volume and how it has less to do with, I would say, isolated influencers and more to do with like the volume over an extended period of time.
Yeah, that's exactly what we excelled at. Is we are a volume play versus a single celebrity play, and we're able to do that simply because it's very hard to execute on volume. You do need a lot of. I mean, trying to do this yourself. Imagine trying to DM everyone, responding about scheduling, hoping they show up. When are you posting content? You really do need a solution like Mustard that's going to help you create that to handle all the logistics involved in getting all these influencers come in and getting the volume that you need.
Here's the other issue I have with like big influencers, right? Or like even I would argue, like, let's look at like the TikToks of the world. So, like, TikTok is amazing in the way that you can achieve massive virality, right? Like, I had a client and he was like, oh my God, I got like 500,000 views on this one video, but he's located in Kenosha, Wisconsin, right? And so I asked him, I said, like, well done. How many of those 500,000 people, right, are in proximity to your restaurant in Kenosha, Wisconsin? Right? Easier said than done. Yes. I think that the problem with social media marketing, I think the problem with influencer marketing, its scale, is that the restaurant industry is highly localized. I think it makes it really easy to sell blue jeans online through a website. I think it makes it really hard to sell food through a brick and mortar restaurant. But I think that's where micro influencers come into play, right? That it's a hike.
100%.
Go
It's not
ahead.
just micro influencers, but we are focused on localized influencers, and we make that distinction with our platform whenever we recruit for restaurants in our industry. We have a requirement of 30-mile radius, and plus the influencers themselves have to come in and film versus a mega celebrity that may not potentially. I mean, Kim Kardashian may not want to travel to your restaurant wherever it is to eat at your food, simply because it just doesn't make a lot of sense for her. You may get a lot of views, but her followers, even her followers, may not be around the vicinity of where your restaurants are located. And our take on it is a lot of the influencers, because they're local, their followers tend to be local. Of course, we don't know 100, like it's a one-on-one relationship, but generally, what we see is they generally tend to be local because we can see the attributed ROI, the revenue that's related when they come in.
I want to talk about ROI because I think that it's incredibly important. In one of our very first conversations, I said, selling into the restaurant industry is incredibly easy. You just have to make it free, right? The thing that you do, whatever you charge, has to be at a rate where they are guaranteed to make money off this thing, right? No matter what, that it's not break even, but that it was actually worth their time and effort. And I know that, like, especially as a performance marketer, you put a lot of time and attention into it. And so, if somebody's on the fence and they're wondering whether, this is worth the investment or not, like, what have you done on the back end, right? Especially with such a skeptical audience. What have you done on the back end to make sure that people get obvious ROI out the gate?
Yeah, what I mean, the biggest feedback I've gotten so far is, hey, I don't want to risk a lot of money without actually trying it out. So in the last month, we've introduced a kind of like a preview view mode for a lot of restaurateurs to come in, preview exactly who are the creators, and they want to get launched. A simple, I believe, $99 per month is all they have to risk, and see who are the influencers. At the end of the day, it's relatively low risk for a restaurant operator to try influencer marketing. On top of that, a lot of times they try it and they think it's one and done. And like, for example, they get one influencer and they will expect to see tons of business the very next day. That's just not how influencer marketing works. It takes time for the post to get generated through the algorithm. It takes customers to view it and say, oh, I'm going to come in next week or the following week. And at the end, you need to be consistent with the number of content. And plus, unlike paid ads, you also get a lot of You got a lot of the content. You can reuse the content for your own purposes and say, hey, look, this person has come in, or stitch it together to create new content.
Social platforms shift constantly. The algorithms are changing and trends like explode and then they die. How do you think that influencer marketing how do you think that influencer marketing works relative to, let's say, virality? Because I think that there are a lot of restaurants out there, right, trying to chase virality relative, as opposed to like the consistency that comes from, right, consistent exposure to a localized market. As a professional marketer, how do you weigh out the pros and the cons of both in your own mind?
It's high risk. I mean, sometimes you might get virality. You never know, right? Those are your Hail Marys. You will get them sometimes if you have. It's not always on the influencers. Half of the battle is done with the food and the content that you present, the experience. Did the influencer enjoy exactly what you presented to them? If say like you're a pizza restaurant and you didn't present anything that's very impressive visually to the influencer, I wouldn't expect that to go virally. The likelihood is not is not going to be great. But say if you have a bunch of influencers that are coming in and eating your pizza and talking about, oh, it's amazing, then it becomes more of a word of mouth. It's like, okay, you now have 10 people saying your pizza is amazing. Um, Visually, it might not be that impressive, but because they all work together and these 10 people that have a reach of over maybe 500,000 or 1 million people saying that your pizza is amazing, there's going to be some people that are going to come in and check it out.
You know, man, my greatest ambition in life is to answer only one question in the minds of restaurateurs, which is what is marketing? What is restaurant marketing? Because I think that marketing is like this big, opaque thing for most people when all it is it's an email, right? It's a text message, it's a social media post, it's a strategic partnership, it's a line on a menu. Like marketing, more than anything, once you get into it, once you do it for long enough, it's the things that you do more than anything else. It's so simple to me. Like it's so clear to me, Vince. And I know that it's not that way for a lot of people. And the way that I got there um, was after doing it, right? Myself for so many time or for so many years. And then again, through other people's businesses. And so for me, when I look at restaurant marketing, it's simple. That doesn't mean it's easy, right? Like getting in shape is simple. That doesn't mean it's easy. Um, and so you have a very similar viewpoint in that you guys work through thousands of restaurants and tens or hundreds of thousands of influencers. I'm sure that it seems simple to you as well. What is the formula for awareness for a restaurant that's either struggling for visibility or looking to stake a bigger claim in their market?
Yeah, I think it's number one is be consistent in terms of marketing. Don't go for the Hail Marys. It's sometimes you might get it and get lucky if you present it right. But being consistent in getting either influencer marketing or doing what you're doing, keeping that experience up for when you have someone come in, giving them the great experience second or third time. It's the same with marketing. It's you give them the the being consistent consistency.
And you recently took over the role of CEO within the company. Um, Talk to me about that. So I assume, and you tell me if I'm wrong, like nobody takes the big chair unless they have a vision, right? Unless you see that you can offer unique value to the role, because it's not really about keeping the trains running on time. It's like, this is Mustard 2.0. This is my opportunity to put my fingerprints on this thing that I love. As you assume the role of CEO, what were your goals? What were your ambitions? Where did you see opportunity for improvement?
I believe we wanted to build the product. It's now that I'm taking over, I wanted to use a lot of the data driven background that I have to really scale Mustard to all 1 million restaurants use our platform. That's a huge market. Right now, there's a lot of opportunity, but I believe we were more acting like an agency in the past, where it was a one-on-one relationship. Restaurants would ask about one and so and so, and I wanted to transition it more to like a true marketplace, more of like an Uber style type of product. And so now that I'm CEO, that's my plan.
And then, social media is changing and evolving. The restaurant industry is changing and evolving, and we're all obligated to change and evolve with it. How do you see the role of mustard within restaurants evolving in the coming years? How do you see AI playing a role in all?
I think it's going to be an integral part of the restaurant marketing stack. There's so many options out there, but we are one of the lowest cost option. They can simply any restaurant can come in, try us out, see if it works, and they will have established these relationships with the localized influencers in the area, and it's going to be part of the operational flow.
And then metrics, benchmarks for restaurants. For me in my own business, like what I'm always trying to do is say, like, how can I deliver more value? How can I deliver that value faster? Do you see the mustard through the platform as it is, or how you intend to evolve it, is going to be able to serve restaurants better, faster in the
It's
near
never going
term?
to be faster. I mean, our network is always growing for restaurants. We're actually expanding into other verticals as well. We're now doing CPG brands and foods and other events. So even if you're not going to be a restaurant related, say you want to throw like a short term event where DJs comes in, we can now aggregate. We can now cater to that.
And then I want to come up with a checklist for restaurateurs. I can remember the first time I ever engaged an influencer. I thought they were going to come in with a plan, and they had come in and they were ready to work my plan. And they were like, "So, what do you want me to shoot? What do you want me to talk about? What is the thing?" And I was very unprepared in the earliest stages. And I know that you provide best practices to restaurants. So for restaurateurs that intend to engage with influencers, what's the checklist? What should they have ready for the influencer to make sure that they get the most out of that experience?
Yeah, so that's where we specialize in. The process is we're professionalizing influencer marketing for a lot of the influencers. All of the questions were asked ahead of time during the sign up on our platform, and by the time when the influencers comes in, they should already know exactly they're prepared for what they need to do to deliver because they signed up for it.
What are those questions?
A lot of them from the influencer or the restaurant side.
Yeah, on the restaurant side, like what do you think influencers need to know before coming in so that they're well prepared and the restaurant is able to maximize ROI?
Yeah, definitely where the shots are going, what you're going to talk about, where you're going to shoot. Certain things restaurants don't want to be excluded in the shots themselves, in the content themselves, and also I believe the user usage rights.
And what plays better, have you found? Is it just sexy shots of food, or is it the restaurateurs themselves, or both?
It's both. I mean, it's really depends on how. Why not do all of them, right? How multiple influencers try different things. That's the value of mustard is that you can have multiple influencers come in as a restaurateur, try different types of shots. You are the creative director.
And then I want to transition kind of from mustard just to your expertise as a marketer. I'm sure I mean, as a marketer myself, it's really easy to look at the restaurant industry and see a greenfield opportunity, right? Marketing works. Marketing works in every industry. It would work incredibly well in the restaurant industry if restaurateurs were just willing to market and market more effectively, more consistently. Um, what excites you about the restaurant industry? Like influencer marketing aside, where do you see the greenfield opportunities that folks should be looking towards?
I mean, I think everyone likes to eat, and everyone's likes a visual. I believe from a restaurant industry, what excites me is it's really me discovering what's new out there for what new restaurants are opening up, what new concepts are always coming up, and then because I work for Mustard now, I can discover all these new restaurants that are popping up.
And then as you look to the future, what are the goals with Mustard? Like, is it more influencers? Is it more restaurants? Like, where do you feel like you are in the life cycle of the business?
I believe it's we want to bring value to the our clients, in this case, the restaurants, and our goal is always to be how can we get closer to tying the performance metrics to the costs, because at the end of the day, I understand if I'm a restaurant operator and I spend money on something, I want to be able to understand what the ROI is, because that's my background as a marketer. Um, and right now, it's not fully direct without a lot of integration work. We want to make that seamless in the future, where if anyone can just come in and click a button and be able to tie their POS systems or whatever system that is attributed to the revenue itself, and we can go back to the restaurant and say, hey, every dollar you spent generate $3 in revenue. I believe that's going to be an easy sell for anyone.
So the biggest pushback that I've gotten over the years, which is interesting because I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, is that people will tell me, they'll say, "Oh, well, your restaurants were in Los Angeles, so like your marketing is only like big market marketing." And so I would ask you, like, does influencer marketing work in only big markets? Does it work in mid-sized markets? Does it work in tertiary markets?
Not at all. Influencer marketing is just think of like the old way of comping meals. You have a your friend that comes in and you give them a free meal, and if they had a good experience, they'll tell their other friends about it. Influencers are just people with a bigger reach, and if you treat it like so, it's no different than even in a smaller market. Their friends are going to talk about your concept and your food to their friends, and it's going to eventually turn into more customers down the line.
Success leaves clues. And like the way that I like to end these episodes is by asking, what should we steal from you? Like with such a wide aperture, right? Such a wide worldview as it relates to the industry, plus your success in it on both the influencer side and the restaurant side. What are the tactics, tools, and strategies that have served you well as a servant of the industry, as a professional marketer, that we could steal that would ultimately lead to a better life and a better business for us?
Just in general, like what do you mean?
Yeah, like when you look at your life and you see the success that you've enjoyed, right? What are the tactics? What are the tools? What are the strategies? What is the lens through which you see this world that has served you well?
I'm very data driven, so I guess I'm a very very numbers, and it has served me well through the years. Is I make decisions on using data driven decisions.